Welcome to the TMC Newsroom. Thanks for watching. My name is Rich Tehrani. On our program today is King White. He's the president of the Site Selection Group. King, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for being on the program.
Absolutely.
So I was hoping we could talk a little bit about what your organization does.
Sure. Site Selection Group is a global site selection firm. We specialize in multi-market evaluation of communities around the world. One of our niche industries is call centers, which I know your magazine is very impactful in, and how you cover the marketplace.
Thanks. That's Customer Interaction Solutions. Thanks.
Yes, exactly. And so I thought it was relevant that we sit and talk about what we do and how we help companies in the call center sector. And basically what we do is we compare workforces around the world, whether it's domestic or offshore, and we're helping companies make strategic decisions about how to reduce labor costs by either going from a Tier 1 city down to a Tier 2 city domestically, or going offshore to perform their call center activities at a lower cost basis. And on the implementation side, we also help on all the economic incentive negotiations with whether it be international governments or federal, state, and local governments domestically, as well as help on the real estate side, where we basically offer a turnkey package as it relates to negotiating the real estate terms and conditions, as well as building out and getting the site physically ready for them to occupy. So it's really a turnkey solution of the entire life cycle of when you need to open a new call center.
And what's the average size of a company in terms of workers?
Yeah, the projects that we focus in are typically about 100 seats, 100 workstations and greater. So it may be more than one employee in that 100 workstations if they're working more than one shift. So we look at things as workstations. Mm-hmm. So anywhere between 100 workstations to 1,000 workstations is our typical project, with the average probably being 300 to 500.
Now, do you help companies within a state? For example, if a company is in a city and they're thinking about moving to another part of the state, do you work with them to see if there's economic incentives to help them get from point A to point B?
Yes, we do it even locally. I mean, I'll tell you, in most markets today, you take a city like Dallas, Texas as an example, you have all the various municipalities within the city of Dallas now competing for specific projects. So you can even have a local move and access economic incentive dollars for a project. And when you go within a whole state, it opens up more competitive environment. And then when you go multi-state, even greater competition. So you're able to drive more value to the customer.
Do your clients take taxes in the local areas into consideration before making decisions?
Yeah, well, that's part of the evaluation, is we evaluate the business environment of each community in each state, so that we're able to do a cost-benefit analysis of what the impact of the economic incentives, the labor rates, the tax conditions are on the holistic decision that you're about to make.
Now, today with so many municipalities in the red in the U.S. and the potential for municipalities to raise taxes as a result of just trying to get back into the black, or at least trying to increase revenue, do you take that into consideration in terms of how much debt a state happens to have, or how well it's running its fiscal house?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny you say that, because in the last couple of years, we've been getting that request from a lot of our clients, and we've actually built that into our decision matrix modeling. And basically, we look at what the statewide budget deficit is, and we've ranked every state in the U.S. based on their deficit. And so you'll see some key states like Arizona that have had some serious problems scoring very low in our models.
Right. So I mean, that's just a message to states, right? That
yes.
If you're not, it's a message to voters that if you're voting in people that are overspending, you're going to have less jobs in your state. It's that simple, right?
It's very accurate. Yes.
Well, thanks for. I guess that's something that many people believe, but I mean, just you've actually solidified that for us on the program. Now, I know that your company's recently had a merger. I was hoping we can talk about that.
Sure, yes. We've had a strong demand in the economic incentive side of our business, which is where we're negotiating tax abatements, cash grants, training grants, from tax credits from the various federal, state, and local level governments. And with that, we've seen a huge demand from our clients. And so we've reached out to the marketplace, looked at different people to interview and hire in. Well, we found it was more strategic to expedite our growth through the merger with another entity. And that's Business Incentives Group, which is based out of Austin, Texas. And that occurred last week. And so we're in the middle of that integration and bringing on a great gentleman named Lee Higgins, who is now leading our economic incentive practice. And we've definitely answered the needs of our customers.
So in terms of benefiting your current and future customers, can you give me some concrete bullets on just what now your organization will be able to provide more effectively?
Sure. The growing demand is, it's just from the negotiation aspect, there's a lot of people that can, quote unquote, negotiate incentives. Well, we're taking that to the next level because the people we've now teamed with and brought on board, I mean, we're doing a professional level of service, which most of these people have tax backgrounds or either legal backgrounds. And so we're able to, add a level of sophistication to the negotiation process, as well as on the assessment side and evaluating those incentives to understand the financial impact of those incentives. We're able to take that financial analysis to a deeper level. And then lastly, the piece that most people try to avoid is the compliance side. And we're also able to help take the client all the way through the life cycle of the entire economic incentive package. And so we're able to follow these projects through for 10 years.
When you say compliance, is that things like kickers in the contract that you have to have 1,000 people employed within 3 years, and if so, you'll get these incentives?
Exactly. So we can monitor that and process all the applications and all the requirements that are specified in the contract for receiving the incentives.
So as you look out worldwide, are there any parts of the world that are getting more aggressive in the last couple of years in terms of just trying to bring business into their areas?
Just from we're seeing absolutely for the call center side. I mean, internationally for like industrial manufacturing, it's always been very competitive internationally. So Asia as an example. I mean, you're seeing now it's not China, it's other emerging markets. Vietnam as an example is one of the very low-cost markets. Similar thing for call centers. The Philippines is still the dominant Asian marketplace to go open a call center. The government's proactive. They've built some organizations around it. Is there any incentives or anything like that? No, but there's proactive marketing occurring. Mm-hmm. Similarly, Latin America has finally put together more of a consortium of various cities and economic development groups across Latin America, and that's one of the most emerging markets where we're seeing a lot of activity, especially in the call center front. And so you'll see, anything from Colombia to Costa Rica to Panama to Guatemala. Those are some of the markets that have really put together a strong marketing effort for the call center sector.
About 4 or 5 years ago, I remember hearing Egypt popping up and speaking to a few people that were putting call centers in Egypt, and obviously the Middle East has had some turmoil in the last year or so. I'm curious, are you seeing the Middle East as an area for call center growth?
Not as much. Northern Africa is really, which is Egypt is somewhat northern Africa, but South Africa, we typically do 1 or 2 projects there per year. But you're seeing, I've gone completely blank on a couple of markets, but no, there's still activity. I mean, especially for the Western European markets are the one primarily going to the Northern African and Middle Eastern markets for the language skills. And so, you'll see for French speaking, they'll go to Tunisia as an example. There's also some really cool emerging markets like Mauritius, which ACS and a few others have a presence there, but pure English speaking markets, but the labor scalability is very small.
Now, you've been in this business for a while, so you remember probably 20 years or so ago when Ireland was making a really big push in terms of just bringing in all sorts of manufacturing. How's that been in the last few years in terms of their place in the market? They've become a solid location for Western European call centers. I mean, it would be the equivalent of I guess almost like a Phoenix or a Dallas, and you combine some of the major markets. And that's really what it's become to Western Europe. It's not a cost play. It's more of, I want to get out of the United Kingdom and go do it at someplace a little bit lower cost, but It's not the lowest cost place. Right.
It's just lower cost than the most expensive places like London.
Now, with the downturn in the U.S. in the last few years, has that economic change made the U.S. a more attractive place to do business?
There's been a dramatic switch, and we actually just wrote a white paper on this. And basically, the shift really has become, the economy has recovered. It's in the recovery process. And with that, the customer mentality has changed. And the corporate mentality has changed. And really, there's several factors that are causing the U.S. to once again gain a very big stronghold in the call center marketplace. And really, the factors are, number one, the customer demand. The customers wanting English-speaking customer service. They've realized India didn't work, Philippines is still challenging, and so they're pushing back to where it's driving calls back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
The unions are pushing calls back to the States and the telecom companies, so you'll see a lot of calls being driven for that factor. You'll also see another dominant factor is the wage escalation and the value proposition of offshore markets is shrinking every day. Wage escalation is anywhere between 7 to 10% in offshore markets. We put one of the very first call centers in the Philippines back in 2001, and it was a 1,000-person operation, and wages were $1.25 an hour at that point. Today, wages in the Philippines are $2.50, $2.75 an hour. Mm-hmm. So every year, as the wages have gotten higher, now 10% means more each year, and so the value proposition is shrinking, and which is ultimately causing the outsourcers to lose profit margin, and so everything's shrinking, and so it really pushes things back domestically.
So what we're seeing is, and this is something I've actually covered a few times on my blog, just that the global standard of living is being improved in part by American offshoring jobs, and that over time will allow an equalization where it won't be as competitive. It won't be such a great incentive to move jobs overseas because the differential is shrinking.
Correct. I mean, when we have wage escalations of 2 to 3% in the States versus 7 to 10% in offshore markets,
so they'll catch up eventually.
It'll eventually catch up. And I think, and really the last factor I'd throw out there is the saturation and the labor scalability of the offshore markets. Because there's been such high growth over the last decade in the offshore markets, there's not many people left.
Right.
Attrition rates in the offshore markets has elevated from 20%, 30% per annum to more like 70 to 100%.
Because there's issues of education. Not everyone.
Education, there's too much competition.
Right.
So there's not enough qualified applicants, and so it's driving down quality. It's just a double, triple impact on each project. So, there's just so many forces going against it that there's it's more of a wait and see. And so, we really recommend a short-term strategy to offshore growth because the market's always going to change.
Okay, so the producer's flashing me, letting me know we've got about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Final question. At what point does a company contact you before they make a decision to potentially move?
Sure. Usually in the early stages when they come out of an executive meeting and they say, hey, look, we're having significant labor problems. We want to relocate our operation or try to understand why we're having problems. And so we can come in and assess their existing operations and find out why they're having problems, or to simply help them figure out a lower cost solution or another location that would serve their customers better. And so it's in the very infancy stages of the project.
And you're in the call center space now, but you're broadening out.
We've broadened out. We've diversified. But the call center space, considering your publications and everything, make the most sense for your readership for that sector.
Sure. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.